Okay, so maybe you're thinking about reading The Body Keeps the Score.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Maybe you've seen it around, heard people talking about it, but you're just not sure if it's the right book for you.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We're going to break down Bessel van der Kolk's work.
Exactly.
Look at the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
And hopefully by the end, you'll know if it's something you want to spend your time on.
Right. And to be totally upfront, The Body Keeps the Score. It's important. It's a big book in the field of trauma,
Okay.
but it's not, it's not an easy read, and it's not for everybody.
Okay, so right away, nuance. I like it. So who is this book for? Who should absolutely run out and get this? What makes it so special?
I think anyone who wants to really deeply understand the science of trauma,
Okay.
I think that's who this book is for. Because van der Kolk, he doesn't just describe trauma. He explains how it actually changes your brain, how it changes your body,
Right.
on a physical level.
Yeah.
He talks about how it rewires your nervous system.
Okay, but, a lot of people, myself included, we kind of throw around that phrase nervous system.
Yeah.
But what does that actually mean? What does that rewiring look like in real life?
So you can think of your nervous system as the command center of your body, right? It controls everything. It controls your heartbeat. It controls your emotions. And when something traumatic happens, it can really throw your nervous system out of whack. Imagine get stuck in this fight or flight mode.
Oh, yeah.
Even when the danger is long gone. And van der Kolk explains how that can lead to all sorts of symptoms that you might not even think are related. He has this one example of a patient where just a simple smell, just like cologne, triggered a huge flashback for her. It took her right back to a traumatic assault.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just the memory, it's your body.
Yeah.
Your body remembers too and reacts even years later.
Exactly.
That's powerful.
Yeah, your body remembers even if your mind is trying to forget.
Okay.
And those reactions can show up in ways you wouldn't expect. You might have anxiety, or you can't sleep. Maybe you have chronic pain. Some people even have digestive issues.
Okay, now that's where I'm hold on a second.
Yeah.
Digestive issues, really, that's connected to trauma.
So van der Kolk, he lays out a lot of evidence that connects, a nervous system that's out of whack to all kinds of physical problems.
Wait.
He says that chronic stress, a lot of times that comes from trauma. It can mess with your gut microbiome, and that causes inflammation, and then you get digestive problems. And then he also talks about the vagus nerve,
Oh, yeah.
which is this major pathway between your brain and your body. And trauma can mess with that too. And that can impact everything from your heart rate to how your immune system works.
Okay, the vagus nerve, I've heard that phrase, but honestly, I don't really know what it is.
Right.
Does van der Kolk go into that in the book?
He does mention it, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not in as much detail as some people would want. But basically, the vagus nerve is imagine a highway of information going back and forth between your brain and your organs.
Okay.
And when it's working, it helps you calm down after something stressful happens. But trauma can damage that nerve, and then your body can't get back to that balanced state as easily.
So it's the brakes are kind of messed up.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
And that's why, sometimes just talking about trauma in therapy, it's helpful, but it might not be enough for some people.
Right.
Because if your body is still stuck in that high alert state, talking might not actually fix that.
Okay, and that's where these body-based therapies come in,
Right.
which is a big thing that van der Kolk talks about.
Yeah.
So he talks about EMDR, he talks about yoga,
Yeah.
these ways to reconnect with your body, calm down that nervous system.
Yeah.
So how do those actually work?
So he spends a good chunk of the book talking about all these different approaches. Take EMDR, for example.
Yep.
It uses this thing called bilateral stimulation. Basically, you move your eyes back and forth, and at the same time, you focus on the traumatic memory.
Okay.
And somehow that helps reprocess the trauma in a way that, takes away some of the emotional sting, and it helps people develop better coping skills.
So it's not just talking about it, you're actually doing something physical.
Exactly, yeah. You're involving the body in the healing. And it gives people tools to deal with those overwhelming feelings and sensations. That's what makes this book so powerful. It takes traditional therapy and connects it with this bigger picture of how trauma affects us in every way.
So if someone's listening and they're okay, this is interesting, but I don't want this book to make things worse. I don't want to be re-traumatized.
Right.
Is that a valid worry?
Yeah, it's a totally valid worry. And it's something that van der Kolk talked about. He says healing from trauma isn't about reliving that experience again and again. It's more about finding safe ways to process those memories and learn how to cope with what happens afterward, like
Yeah.
physically and emotionally.
Okay, and that's where the body-based stuff comes in.
Exactly, yeah.
So you can deal with the trauma without having to talk about all the details.
Exactly. You can regulate your nervous system, get those fight or flight responses under control
Hmm.
without necessarily rehashing the traumatic event.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm also thinking, how does this compare to other books on trauma?
Yeah.
Like there's The Body Remembers by the Bet Rothschild. There's Peter Levine. He wrote Waking the Tiger.
Right, right.
Are they all kind of saying the same thing?
I mean, there are definitely some overlaps, especially with the whole idea that the body is involved in trauma. Like
Yeah.
Rothschild, she really gets into somatic memory. That's like how trauma is stored in your muscles and tissues.
Hmm.
And Levine, he talks about the freeze response, how animals, humans, we all instinctively try to get rid of that traumatic energy.
Yeah.
And we do it through physical movements.
So what makes The Body Keeps the Score different? What makes it stand out from the others?
I think Kolk is really good at taking like decades of research and making it understandable,
Okay.
but it's still like scientifically solid. He connects neurobiology, psychology, therapeutic practices. It's a whole big picture.
Okay.
And he doesn't just stick to one type of therapy. He talks about all sorts, traditional and alternative.
Okay, so The Body Keeps the Score is like Trauma 101.
Yeah.
It gives you the basics, but it also gives you different options for healing. But let's be honest, is this a tough read?
It can be, yeah, especially if you're new to this whole topic.
Right.
Kolk, he uses some complex scientific terms, and some of his clinical examples, they can be pretty intense.
So not exactly a beach read.
Definitely not. But if you put in the effort, it's worth it. It
Yeah.
can totally change how you think about trauma and how much it affects us.
And for someone who's dealing with PTSD right now,
yeah,
or they're still feeling the effects of trauma, would you recommend this book? Or is it too much, too soon?
that's tough to say. It really depends. Some people find it really validating to see their experience explained by science.
Right.
But for others, if they're easily triggered, all those details about trauma might be overwhelming.
So you got to know yourself.
Yeah, it's a judgment call.
Maybe talk to a therapist first.
Yeah, for sure. It's always good to get professional advice on what's best for you.
Okay, so to sum things up, The Body Keeps the Score is a big deal book.
Yeah.
It dives into the science of trauma, how it affects your mind and your body. It looks at a bunch of different therapies, some traditional, some not.
Right.
But it's not an easy read,
Right.
and it might not be for everyone, especially those who are really struggling right now with PTSD.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary.
So for you, our listener, if you're curious about the science of trauma, if you want to explore different ways to heal, check this book out. It's worth it.
Definitely.
Just remember, it's dense, and be kind to yourself.
Yeah, and it's okay to put it down if it gets too intense. Don't be afraid to ask a therapist for help processing the info.
This whole conversation has really got me thinking, like, if trauma can mess with us so much, physically and mentally, what about just everyday stress? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we all get stressed, but when does it become like something more? Something that's really hurting us?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. And actually, there's a lot of research on that right now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they call it toxic stress. It's basically when you have this constant stress, like it never lets up. And that can actually change your brain, especially when you're a kid. It makes you more likely to have all these health problems later on.
So even if you haven't had like a big, obvious trauma, just everyday stuff can still really get to you.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about it. Money problems, job worries, even those little like annoying things that happen every day.
Right.
It all adds up. It wears you down. And for kids, it's even worse.
Yeah, because their brains are still developing.
Exactly. If they're growing up with all this stress, it can actually change the structure of their brain. They might be more anxious, more depressed, even get sick more often as adults.
Wow. So it's not just about helping people who've been through something big.
Right.
It's about making sure everyone has a safe, supportive environment.
Absolutely. It's all connected, our minds, our emotions, our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Kolk is getting at in The Body Keeps the Score. He's making us rethink what trauma is, how big of a deal it is, not just for individuals, but for everybody.
It really makes you think. So to our listener, if you're fascinated by this idea that our bodies actually hold on to our experiences, check out this book. It's powerful. It's insightful. It might make you question some things, make you curious.
Yeah,
It might even inspire you to find new ways to heal and grow.
definitely.
Just be ready. It's a lot to take in. Maybe grab a highlighter so you can mark the parts that really get to you.
And if you want to keep learning about trauma and resilience, we'll put some links in the show notes to other great books and resources.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today. We always love having you here. We'll be back next week with another deep dive on something totally new. Until then, take care of yourselves, mind and body.